So you'll notice that eventually I made it back home. Well, let me tell you about it. The next day after my last 34-hour reset, I did jump on the road, and I got about almost 600 miles down. And as I was approaching my last check, my load securement check location, I realized that the truck stops that I had been seeing had been fewer and farther between. So kind of like California. And I was looking at this saying, I need to make sure that I can find a truck stop. Well, I stopped at one, and it ended up being the road that it was wanting me to route and take is like this side back road, this U.S. interstate. But I wasn't able to use that one. I had to continue north to 70. I forgot the city, but I think it's in Virginia, maybe Maryland, wherever it was. Anyway, there's a pilot over there, and it says, you can pull over there. The problem is they charge $15 for overnight stays. And I'm not about to do that if there's another option. So I went ahead and said, well, I still have a couple hours. I'm going to go ahead and hit the road. Well, I did look it up, and I think it was Maryland now that I think about it. Because Maryland allows you to, at truck stops, you're allowed to take, if you're in a commercial vehicle, you're allowed to sleep in a parking spot there. So I went ahead and pulled over at the South Mountain, I think it's Fort Lena, if memory serves. South Mountain rest area on 70, and it ended up being great because I pulled in there to do a load securement check, and then I said, you know what? Why do I need to continue forward? So I looked at my app real quick, and I started doing a couple of searches. I did the Flying J app, I looked at the Loves app, and I looked also at Google. If you do in Google Maps, you do a search for truck stops. It will tell you the ones along the way. Well, most of them. Sometimes there's others that show up that on the road when you're driving it that don't show up as truck stops in Google Maps. But anyway, so I kind of got a lay of the land there and said, you know what, I think I'm good. I think I'm going to go ahead and just shut down, because if you shut down early, you can still leave early enough. And I was only about 180 miles, I think it was, from where I was going. And I said, you know what, I'll have more than enough hours tomorrow. Might as well do that. So I went ahead and shut down there and called it. Next morning I got up, drove in early, got to drop off in New Jersey nice and early. One interesting thing happened. I got another critical event. And this one irritated me, because I know from talking to the OSR group that if whatever is right in front of the truck is what it's looking at. I don't think the sensor, I think the sensor just sees the vehicles in front of you. I don't know that they can see lights. The reason I'm saying this is because I was driving straight down the road, and up ahead of me, maybe, I think I was going 35, 40 miles an hour, because the speed limit was 45, and we had just got through coming from a red light, and I was getting ready to stop. So I was watching for my turn, and I'm driving, and the road slightly curves to the left. This is in New Jersey, so the roads are a little bit more narrow. They're about maybe 10 feet wide. So you only have 9 inches or so on either side if you're centered in this little area. So I'm centered in the lane, because I check it on the hood mirrors, and I look back constantly, checking my mirrors to make sure I'm centered. And we were starting to go around a little bit of a curve to the left, and there's a car in the lane to my left that is probably 100 and some odd feet in front of me, and I see him put on a lane, or put on a turning indicator to the left, and go pass through my lane over to the next lane. And once he gets there, he's trying to go into a gas station. He, how the lane's like this. Well, he decides that he wants to go all the way up to the edge of the line and then over ever so slightly, just barely, like that much over, in order to make a right turn and not lose a whole lot of speed. He wanted to make a wide turn. But since I was going around the curve a little bit to the left, that lane was in front of me. And so since the car had pulled over and crossed in front of me and was in that turning lane, he was slowing down. And so as I'm going around this turn, he's maybe about 40, maybe 50 feet away. And when he is, and I'm, anytime, I'm driving in that lane. I'm watching the cars to make sure that they're not doing anything stupid. And when I saw the car kind of graduate over to the left-hand side of that lane and then make the right turn, the truck, I guess, saw that he was right in front of me. And it slams on the brakes for one little quick moment. And it pops up a thing that says critical event and whatever else. And I'm like, truck, I'm getting really tired of driving down the road and having it slam on the brakes, because that's really, really irritating. I understand it's a collision warning system and it's trying to prevent an accident, but this thing is, if this system is functioning correctly, it's going to start, I can imagine it throwing off other drivers too. I understand it's a safety system, but it's not a perfect system. And look, the guy went, like I said, like 2 inches over for a split second, because he was basically doing this number. And he was still a good 50 feet in front of me when he made that turn and whipped and popped into my lane just for a second to make that turn. But it ended up being that he was so far in front of me that he ended up being in front of me because I'm making a slight left turn. And so when he did that and put on his brakes and made that turn, the truck just sensed him there and freaked out. So it just did the equivalent of like hitting the brakes really quickly and then taking your foot back off, just enough to throw me forward and make me, like, I expressed some colorful language. Let's just put it that way. Anyway, I didn't even have a chance to put my foot on the brake or because my foot was gently on the gas at that point because I was slightly going around a turn, and it just slams on the brakes. And so I'm like, what was that about? And when it pops up critical event, I'm like, great. Another thing for Schneider to look at and say, what's this other critical event? But it's, I don't know if I took the truck in and said, can you look at it, if they're going to say, oh, no, it's functioning just fine, that happens. Or if they're even going to look at it. Or if they did look at it, are they going to detect an issue? Is the sensor off a little bit? Because sometimes I'll get going down a hill and I will notice that for whatever reason, if I'm going down a hill, not even on a high grade or anything like that, I'll just be going down a hill and all of a sudden it'll put the brakes on kind of aggressively, and I'll be a few hundred feet away from the car in front of me. I'm wondering if it's seeing the slope, just the hill, and because the truck I'm wondering if it's scanning straight ahead, but because the weight is on the front of the truck, that would make more sense for it to go back if it's on the drive tires. I don't know. Maybe if it's not as heavy as the front of the truck, if the truck tips down, maybe it's seeing the ground. I don't know. Got to think about that. What I do know is that that critical event, I'm having to watch the truck, and it always surprises me with these critical events. That's the only time it's given me a critical event since the last time I told you about it. Now, I did talk to the OSR group, and they said critical events are making you aware of something. And it's like multiple stages of collision awareness or of whatever. And they said, we'll contact you if you need to tell, if we want to hear about a critical event or hear about some. He gave it a different word. Critical event is like making me aware that there was something that got to stage 2 of awareness or something like that for the system. If it hits 3, then that's when Schneider's notified or something, if memory serves. I don't remember exactly what it was. But it's one of those things where, to me, I looked at that and said, okay, I'm not gonna bother calling Schneider. If they call me, I'll explain. But to me, that was one of those irritating things, because I understand the system. I understand that it's a collision warning system, but I was slightly going around a left turn, and that lane was in front of me, and because the lanes are skinnier, it was right in front of me. And when he went to the left side of the lane and then made a right turn, maybe it saw that his car squared up left, squared up to my truck for a second, because if he's going this way around the curve and then does this number, I don't know. Anyway, did that drop off, and this is where I get kind of annoyed. I did that drop off in New Jersey, got there like 6:04 a.m. Did my drop completely, everything was done, and I did not have a pre-assignment just yet. So at this point, I loop around and I loop around and stay in the general area. But I stop on the entrance going in, and I sit out there for a while. If you're on that side, it says no parking. On this side, it doesn't say no parking. So I sat on this side for about half an hour, and then I said, you know what, I'm not just going to sit here. So at this point, I spun it around, and I went down the road. If you go back out and then turn left and go down about 1.5 miles, there's a pilot down there, but every single one of the spaces there is reserved if you're there for over 6 hours. If you're there for under 6 hours, you're fine. So anyway, it was at this point about 7 a.m. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to go ahead and go in there, because I had offloaded everything about 6:30, hung out there until just after 7. And then I went over to the pilot and hung out there. And I'm sitting there on the list. I've turned in all of my ETAs, everything the way I'm supposed to. And I'm waiting for an assignment because it's a Monday. Pods is slow to get jobs out. And I am just sitting there twiddling my thumbs, and I'm just sitting there waiting and waiting. And because they tell you to log off and jump off the hour, I mean, the way I look at it is they pay you $10 an hour to sit there and do something that's not driving, like if you're pre-tripping or something like that. To me, that's less than they pay you at McDonald's now. It's not going to break Schneider if it's their fault. If it's the customer's fault, or there's if I'm on a dedicated account, in my opinion, if I sat there for 3 days and did not have a job because there was nothing, it's still my time that's being used sitting there in the truck. There's only so many times, so many things that you can do looking at Netflix. I'm bored with Netflix already. I don't sit there and watch things all day long. I get bored with it. And me personally, sitting there, twiddling my thumbs, a lot of other companies pay you detention pay or pay you wait, to wait if it's over like 2 hours or something like that. And and I sat there that day without a job from 6:30 a.m. until finally at 2 o'clock I said, I'm not going to pay this overnight fee to sit here at this truck stop. So I'm going to go to the nearest truck stop, because that's New Jersey and they love to charge for parking up there. I go to the nearest truck stop that I know that doesn't have one, which is 40 some odd miles away. So yes, 8-ish miles per gallon for fuel. Driving about 40 some odd miles is about 6 or so gallons of fuel. And then I have to go back the next day at about $4.50 or $5 per gallon. Stepping over dollars to pick up dimes. If Schneider, if someone is watching from Schneider, it would be one of those things where it would be probably beneficial to Schneider to reimburse for reserve parking if that is in certain areas of the country, because it would be better to do that for stubborn people like me that don't want to pay out of pocket. Schneider is not currently paying me enough money to want to go out of pocket, even though I get to write it off later. I don't want to end up doing that. I have family at home and trying to spend as little money as I can on the road because I'm trying to send things back. Now, I spent some money up in advance to get things set up for the truck, and that's fine. And I don't mind doing that. But on the road, I don't want to end up spending money on things like reserved parking spaces. And because I got the little air compressor thing, and we rolled over to a new month a couple of days ago, or a few days ago. Like today is, the 7th day of the month. So granted, I could have, if I filled up, but sitting there, you're not filling up a whole lot, So I didn't get a whole lot on my multiplier with my Flying J app. So I didn't have a whole lot of credits, and I'm not about to, spend money out of pocket to get a reserve space, and I didn't have the points. Because I ended up buying something the other day, and I forgot what it was, but it charged points, and I was like, oh, I was going to pay out of pocket for this, and they used my points, and then I'm stubborn. So what can I say? I didn't want to do it. But it would probably be beneficial if Schneider were to allow people to pay. If you're in certain areas, like California is a big one. If there's a parking lot or truck stop parking, and they happen to charge for parking, or up in the Maryland, New Jersey, New York area, a lot of the truck stops in certain areas of the country, if your GPS happens to say you're there, it would be beneficial probably to the company to reimburse for reserve parking if you happen to park there. To my knowledge, they don't do that, but it'd probably be beneficial and save fuel and time. Let the truth be known. But I mean, they don't care about time if you're driving because they don't pay you for that. They only pay you a certain amount per mileage, and They don't pay you once you've done your drop before you get another one. You're not being paid anything. So anyway, the one thing I wish, in retrospect, I wish as I was sitting there all day, I would have thought about is the fact that when I pulled back out of there to leave for the day, I realized there was a Walmart across the street. I could have gone there and gotten some shopping done. I didn't think about that, but because I was sitting there watching the clock saying, please, please, please give me a job, give me a job, give me a job, because I want to get going on it. And I knew that the second I went away from the truck is the second that I would get the job, and I would get a maximum amount down the road before I shut down for the night if I did. So anyway, that was my mentality for shopping. I probably would have gone over to the Walmart if I would have noticed it earlier. So anyway, the next morning, I that afternoon, about 4:30, 5 o'clock, Pods finally sent me in a job. And that's just the system. I can't blame Schneider. I can't blame Pods. Schneider, I'm following the rules. And Schneider and Pods both know that I'm available. And I can't blame them. They do things the way they do it that works best for them. There's a couple of things I would tell Pods. Like, for example, the app that we have to put our trip sheet in and put our order numbers in that we do ETAs with, it's very ineffective in a very inefficient way. We should be able to enter one trip sheet number, and then it brings up a form that allows us to put in all of our order numbers, and then we can start to say what kind of a load or unload it is and what times are we going to be there and that kind of thing. It would be great to just list it all on a screen. As it currently is, you're only allowed to do one container at a time. And you have to go down, and sometimes a trip sheet will have 3 containers, sometimes 4, and then you drop off and pick up different combinations, and then you'll have 7 or 8 stops. So you have to go back and re-enter the order number, and that gets quite a bit of annoying redundancy. So I can imagine why people don't always put the information in the way they should. If the form were updated, I would love to see a trip sheet that you type in the trip sheet, then from there it takes you to the website where you could just enter order number, and then you could go in and put all of you can just drop down the list and put in your ETAs and that kind of stuff. So anyway, that would be nice. Anyway, the next day, I did get another job. And as I was sitting there waiting for a job on Monday, I was thinking about it and saying to myself, if they can't get me back to Atlanta, can they get me most of the way back to Atlanta? Or at least in that direction? Because right now, I'm up at the top of America. It'd be great if I could get that direction. Like maybe put me back towards Kentucky, put me towards Tennessee, someplace down there. And so what I did is I requested this. Now the DTLs are very good. They're not able to do everything in they're not able to do wizardry. They're able to do quite a bit. If they have a job that goes in a direction and they can prioritize me or something like that, they will. Because they know that I'm listed as starting my home time. And they did, to their credit. They sent me a job that was actually starting in New Jersey and then going to 2 cities in New York, and then going to a city in Tennessee and then in North Carolina. Now, they also know me. They know that they sent me that job. So the next morning, I was there in New Jersey. I picked up there. I actually got there earlier. I got there about an hour and a half early. Did my first drop and got there to the next location about an hour. Actually, it was a little bit over an hour later because there was just standstill traffic for no reason. Let's just do road construction and block up all lanes and do this for half an hour. So I got to my second location, and then I looked at it and I said, I was only like 20 miles away from New York City at that point. And I looked at that and said, I got to get out of the city. It's like 12:30. And I had, I think, about 5 hours left on my clock. And so I said, what direction? And so after I did the stop, I quickly looked at my maps and I said, where do I need to go and which direction is it taking me? It was taking me straight down 81 into Tennessee, Interstate 81. And I looked at that and it was taking me right past Harrisburg, Carlisle, which is where one of the Schneider OCs is. So I said, I can stop at an OC overnight. And that would be one of those things I can just get there when I get there, and I don't have to worry about having to find a parking spot. That's one of the biggest issues that if you go in some areas of the country, parking spots will fill up about 1 or 2 in the afternoon. Sometimes they don't fill up until closer to 7 or so in the evening. And some people will leave. They'll come in there and they'll eat and then they'll leave, but then you're fighting other truckers trying to get those spots. So I usually try to get there early, as you guys know. But when you're going to an OC, you can find a parking spot. So I went ahead and said, I'm going to go to the Harrisburg Carlisle OC. So this is like the, third, fourth OC? Because I've been to Wilmer, Atlanta, obviously. I drove by Nashville on my way up to New Jersey a couple of days ago. But no, it was fine. I ended up, I stopped there overnight. And it's OCs, I was able to refill my wiper fluid and stuff like that, which is nice because bugs, they'll hit your windshield all the time, and I don't want to end up looking at a bug that's splat on my window and it's looking like someone took a soft peppermint of some sort and splashed it on my window, because it's white with black in it. I'm like, I know it's a bug, but at the same time, I love peppermint. So it's like, it's one of those things that plays with your mind. It looks like a little place in your windshield. It's like, okay, I'm going to wipe that thing off. But the windshield wipers and the wiper fluid, usually if you catch it pretty quickly, it'll smear a little bit, but it'll at least take it so it's not this big, huge glob. It'll smear it down to, a light, whatever. And then my next stop, I'll take it off. But it's one of those things I do. I'm weird. What can I say? So anyway, I stopped there for the night, and then the next day I was only able to, because I was able to get maybe from that last stop about 250 miles down. The next day I did the other 400 and change miles to drop off in Johnson City. But because it's so slow going up and down hills, the mountains, the mountain ranges, it was so slow because you're in one lane. You have to be in the right lane, and you're going to be behind somebody on a flatbed or a truck that's going, fighting their way up, going 25 miles an hour, and you can't pass them. You're not allowed to pass them. And get in the left lane, that's a car lane. So I'm sitting there trying to fight my way up these hills after these cars. And I was like, I'm not going to be able to make it to Charlotte. I'm not going to be able to make my last drop today. But so I went ahead and shut down in Johnson City. Well, not even Johnson City. It was on the other side of that, because I did my drop, and it was, I think, Marion, North Carolina, to pilot there. I went in there to fuel, actually, and I was going to continue down the road, even though the truck stops are few and far between there. But I pulled, as I was pulling around there, I noticed it was one parking space, and they only had a few, only 40 spaces total. And I looked at it and I said, there's one space right here that's open. Well, I'm going to go ahead and pull it right in there and back into the spot. So I did. And then I said, you know what? First thing tomorrow morning, I'll refuel. And I did. So the next morning, I got up, and this is when I got really appreciative of something Schneider did. They realized that I was already into my home time at that point, and they could have had me wait at Charlotte after I dropped off that load. But instead what they did is they said, we're going to just route you to Atlanta. So they routed me to the Schneider OC, because I know in some accounts what they'll do is whatever city you happen to be in, they'll say, okay, park it, and then they'll fly you home. Some accounts will fly you. I don't need that. But at the same time, I appreciated the fact that this time at least, I was only, not very, only a few hundred miles, a couple hundred miles away from Atlanta. So they went ahead, and when I dropped off in Charlotte, I had called in advance and said, what time do you start offloading semis? And I was sent back a text message that said 6:45. I said, great, thank you. I showed up that next morning at 6:45. It was right at 6:45. And they're having a meeting in the front, and they kept us waiting until about 7:30. So I was just sitting there waiting there while they had their meeting. But I went ahead and unstrapped and stuff like that, dropped off that container, and then went south. And man, do they love doing road construction headed down 85 from basically the time you get to inside the Georgia border. They'll just do road construction. Let's just do road construction, stop everything for time and time again. So it was really annoying. Anyway, did that, got back and dropped off the truck, did the post trip, and grabbed my stuff, and I came home. So I am home now, and I'm home for another few days, which is nice. Home time. The one thing that's on my mind, though, is that if it's a routine thing and takes a few days to get me home, if that's the routine, last time they were really good about because I didn't know I just supposed to put in a 2-week notice for a home time. So I just said, can you pull any strings and get me home? And they were able to do that the next day. I was like, thank you so much. Now, I understand that it gets things in the system, it lets pods know, and that way they can continue to send you work. But it also was a little bit of a hiccup in this time trying to get me home. They didn't have a job for me because they were trying to send me someplace where it wasn't going to take me too far away, so that way they could get me back to Atlanta for my home time. Even then, they still sent me 800 and some odd miles away, and I arrived there the day I was supposed to be arriving home. So it didn't end up being perfect and the way it worked out, but I understand they have to do things in their system, and it's a business. They're going to do things. They told me that it wasn't, that I couldn't start my home time early. I understand. But it was still a process. It was still something that was a bit annoying. So, so if it's a routine thing and it sometimes takes an extra few days to get me home, sometimes it might not be a good, it might not work for me to have home time at that point. And what I'm looking at is the next time in 3 weeks when I would be potentially coming home. As of the time of this video, it is October 7th. When I start back, it'll be the 10th. 3 weeks from that, it'll be Halloween. So if they send me home for Halloween, I'd love to spend that with my family. If they are not able to get me back on by Halloween, though, if it's one of those things where they're like, well, we can't send you a job, but you're still on the list, and it ends up taking a day or two to get me something, I'd almost rather them say, okay, fine, cancel my home time and send me back out. Now, granted, my family loves Halloween, so I'd rather be home for Halloween if I can, especially since it ends up being right in my schedule. But the next break after that would be over Thanksgiving. And my family would like to have me home for Thanksgiving. But at the same time, if it doesn't end up, if it takes them a few days and it delays them sending me jobs for me to be able to get back on the road, I would almost rather cancel my home time if there's nothing going on, and then staying on the road. I mean, I hate saying that because I love spending time with my family. I love being home with them. But if it means that sometimes it can take a few days to get me a load, or if it could take me a couple of days, or if I'm just sitting there wasting time and I'm not being compensated for it, that to me is annoying. I'm doing this to make money. I'm doing this to support my family. And if it takes them a few days to send me a load because they're trying to work my schedule in a way so that way they can get me there and back in time, I would love nothing more than to be sent across the country before it gets too cold. I would love that. That way I could see out west again, because granted, I was very new when I first went out there. I was really watching things like, looking at everything on the truck and making sure that I was paying attention to every little detail and checking my mirrors, every 4 to 6 seconds. And I wasn't looking at a whole lot of things. I'm now settled more into it. I could appreciate where things are going. And only another month or two from now, those roads are going to be icing over. So it's like, be aware of that. So anyway, that's what's on my mind right now. We'll see what happens. Hopefully I can get back before Halloween, but we'll see what happens, because I still got to be on the road for 3 weeks. Got to do my part and then get home. So we'll see what happens.